Like many games, Team Fortress 2 has no shortage of cut content. Throughout its initial development period and in the years that followed, Valve planned numerous updates and additions to the game which never made it to fruition. This is a trait which is shared with the game's long history of crossovers with other IPs. But there's one crossover in particular which never saw the light of day. It's a collaboration that seems to be seldom mentioned on the internet. The Conan O'Brien crossover. If you haven't heard about this before, even as a diehard fan of TF2, I wouldn't blame you. Looking up Conan Team Fortress 2 online doesn't bring up any results, except whatever this is. This is all largely due to the nature of the crossover and the fact that both Valve and NBC kept it heavily under wraps. So, if you've never heard about it before, here's a brief history as to what the Conan crossover was, what happened to it, and where it is today. During Conan's short tenure as the host of The Tonight Show, the ratings of the show had decreased significantly since his appointment as host. This was a phenomenon shared with other shows during the same time in 2009, leading to their parent network, NBC, to devise new strategies to boost the ratings of their broadcasts. Each show on NBC all had varying but similar approaches to increasing viewership, namely with increasing their online presence. However, The Tonight Show's production company, Conoco, decided to take a more unique approach in regard to boosting their brand online. Producers for the company had taken notice of the rapidly increasing popularity of online shooters, like Team Fortress 2. With tens of thousands of people playing the game at nearly all times and with an incredible cultural impact on the online gaming sphere and the internet at large, a game like TF2 seemed like the perfect candidate to dive into the ever-expanding audience of gamers. This is the entire reason Conan would go on to making his short series, Clueless Gamer. Not long after the release of the Classless update on August 13, 2009, NBC approached Valve about a potential crossover between The Tonight Show and Team Fortress 2. Seemingly, the network was able to strike a deal with Valve, but the specifics of what the two companies agreed to is largely unknown. Nevertheless, we know that work was being done on the project between August and October of 2009. This is all thanks to Valve artist Mike Danvers' LinkedIn page, who years ago posted concept art from this update. One of these art pieces depicts Conan almost as his own class, labeled as The Conan. Another piece of concept art showcases a reference sheet for 3D modeling, indicating that the project got far enough as to have an actual in-game model for Conan. This begs the question, what was this crossover actually meant to be? While information is limited, we do know that the deal between NBC and Valve was to have Conan as a limited-time class in the game. The duration of this crossover is unknown, but even if it made it off the ground, it would likely not last long due to Conan's departure from NBC only a few months later. Now, the thing I came to realize while writing this video was that just showing some concept art and not giving much detail isn't necessarily suitable in regard to discussing an entire class that never made it into the game, much less one that was only meant to exist for a limited time. After having discussions with some contacts of mine, I figured out that some of the files from when the crossover was in development did still exist. They weren't like Seduce, where the game wasn't even in the possession of a collector. They actually existed on the hard drives of certain individuals. This led me to contact the well-known hot dog reviewer, Tyler McVapor, to see if he had any information about the whereabouts of the Conan files. Oh, there we go. Thanks for picking up. Listen, the day we talked about, all these years, it's here. I need the Conan files, the MDL, the audio, everything. I know it's not easy, but people need to know about the crossover.
Okay.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. Immediately upon joining a game, you are greeted with a sorry sight. I wouldn't consider it a stretch to say that Conan's in-game model is terrifying. It's disturbing not only because it resembles a Lovecraftian child of incest between the Scout and Syndrome, but because it's barely reminiscent of the guy it's supposed to be based on. What's obvious about this model is that a 3D artist at Valve decided to take the concept art and references that Danvers designed, and decided to throw it entirely out of the window. Perhaps you think I'm exaggerating, but seriously, compare the real-life Conan to his Team Fortress counterpart. The difference is night and day. Despite his uncanny appearance, the Conan class seemed to get further in development than originally thought. While the view model arms still resembled the Scout himself, including his portrait, The Conan is entirely modeled and textured for use on both teams. His rigging and topology, however, seems to have been done by a 14-year-old creating their first Roblox model. No shade if you're 14 and making your first Roblox model. Nonetheless, the amount of effort put into the crossover is not only apparent solely with his model, but also given that nearly all of his voice lines have been replaced by Conan voiceovers.
I smush you! Huh?
By the time I'm done speaking, we'll all be dead.
What the f***'s going on? This is nothing. What's gonna happen? What's wrong with me? Why can't I feel? Come on, man, are we doing this or not?
And so it begins.
Back that shit up! I'm...
What becomes apparent while playing as the Conan is that while his model is not entirely complete, neither are his voiceovers. While they do exist, they seem to be placeholders, and not final recordings for retail release. Further evidence suggesting that the crossover was never completed are seen in the nature of the class itself. Instead of being its own independent class, as the concept art and details of the NBC Valve deal showed, this class simply replaces the Scout entirely. It's effectively just a model swap with some new sounds, given that he still has all of the Scout's weapons, taunts, and items. While we know he was supposed to be his own class, the details about what would have made him unique are unknown. Furthermore, we can assume he replaced the Scout simply for testing purposes, but whether or not it was intentionally the Scout is not known. With any other merc, you could assume it was simply for testing, whereas both the Scout and Conan hail from the Boston metropolitan area, with Scout from South Boston and Conan from the town of Brookline. This would lead one to ponder if Valve replaced him with the Scout intentionally due to their shared heritage, or if it was merely a coincidence. I can already hear you asking the question, why did this crossover never come to fruition? Information on the nature of the development and behind the scenes work is limited, but we do know a few things. First, NBC and Valve appear to have had somewhat of a falling out, and that's largely due to the crossover having Conan as an entirely separate class in the game, rather than just replacing one merc for a short time period. NBC seemed dead set on keeping the Conan as his own class, whereas Valve would push back on the idea after development of the character had already started, primarily under the pretense of it affecting the meta of the game and interfering with the gameplay rather significantly. Keeping Conan as a visual and auditory replacement for a limited time seemed to be what the two companies would eventually agree upon, given that the files for the crossover simply have Conan acting as a stand-in for the Scout. The project and partnership would ultimately end in October of 2009, after a nearly 3-month development period. I honestly couldn't tell you why this happened, but it likely had something to do with the dispute that both NBC and Valve had. While Conoco conceived of the idea originally, Conan himself likely had no idea this was ever happening. Although, he was asked about it once on his podcast, Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, and here was his response.
I think there should be a Senate investigation.
After fully understanding the nature of the Conan crossover, I found myself a little bit disappointed. It seemed like such a wasted opportunity to miss out on adding a titan of comedy to a game that is undeniably comedic as well. So I decided to pit two 12-man Conan teams against each other in a control point match on Gorge, to see what happens. The red strategy is one of mass control. Seemingly, they all linger on the control point, which makes sense because they're Conans. The blue team, on the other hand, just kinda stands there. At the bell, blue decides to go down one tunnel before immediately making a U-turn and going straight into the battle as one massive swarm. The red team's defensive strategy has now also seemingly completely fallen to the ashes, as more than half of the team has now retreated, allowing the blue team's blitzkrieg strategy to work with minimal casualties. The assault on the final control point, however, is a different story. At first, the blue team actually makes great headway in capturing the final control point. Hell, they almost win 2 separate times, up until red regains control of the situation by utterly smiting the attacking team. This goes on for a long time. I decided to speed up the game by 5 times to make it go faster, and even then I don't know who won, because the game crashed. That led me to try a different experiment, a 3v3 on the same map. Well, technically it's a 3v2, because myself as a spectator counts as a member of the red team, preventing an additional Conan from spawning. Nevertheless, the 3-man blue team decides to take a similar approach from their previous game, where they stay as a group up until they get to the A point. What's worse is that the already diminished red team is destroyed with little effort from their opponents, allowing the blue team an easy first capture. They then handedly deal a crushing blow to one of the 2 red Conans, nearing the cusp of victory, only to leave? This goes on for a minute. Both teams just entirely avoid the actual objective and run around like morons. Eventually, some movement happens when one member of the blue team begins to actually push to the objective, with his other 2 teammates rushing in to assist. This battle results in casualties for both teams, with one of the blue Conans winning a 1v1, and ultimately taking the objective. What you can ultimately glean from the cancelled Conan crossover is that Valve didn't want to sacrifice their game structure and meta in return for a wad of cash from a TV network. Certainly, it is a shame that all the work the Valve developers did for the crossover went unused. But ultimately, I do think it's for the best. While you could have Conan simply as a visual replacement for the Scout for, let's say, a week, and not even have him as a separate class, it would really just be unnecessary. For what it is, the strength of Team Fortress 2 as an IP, even in 2025, is so incredibly powerful that it doesn't need a crossover or some promotional marketing campaign to make the big bucks. It still does that to this day, even with the game getting closer and closer to its 20th birthday. The characters, story, gameplay, and community of Team Fortress 2 doesn't need a comedian like Conan, because it's already shown that even after all this time, it remains an unshakable pillar of gaming and internet culture at large. And you don't need Conan O'Brien to accomplish that. You just need 9 iconic mercenaries. Thank you so much for watching, and also putting up with the delay in terms of getting this video out. I wanted to get it published on Sunday like I normally do, but the amount of work it took to get this project off the ground was far more than I ever anticipated. So, if you enjoyed it, consider leaving a like. I also want to give a huge shout out to AlesBrewery for their work on this video. Without them, it literally would not have been possible. You can check out their links in the description below. If you want to keep up to date with all of my stuff, consider following me on Blue Sky, and make sure to subscribe. As always, make sure to take care of yourself, and just enjoy life. Humanity can be cruel. I think that is especially obvious in the last few years, and to those of us who've grown up in the 2000s and even before that. But it can and always is beautiful just the same. So go buy that damn quarter pounder!